Hi, Krishna.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
Good. A little tired, but good.
Yeah. I was feeling that a little bit, and now I'm like, I'm perking up. I'm perking up. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm just going to drop our replay link in the chat.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Sorry for a little bit of the delay there. YouTube was matching our waking up energy. It was moving a little slow.
No worries.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you on the Wealthy Creative. I was just reflecting inside my Wealthy Creative membership that I haven't really done an interview in a minute. So it's been nice
Okay.
to have a little break and then feel that surge of kind of creative energy around it coming back. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really nice to like pop back in and there's so many cool things that you're doing that I want to get into and share with everybody. And yeah, and just talk about what's fresh and alive in your world and hear what's around the bend. So if you want to just introduce yourself for those catching the replay or catching live, I would love to hear in your words, your magic, and then we
Oh,
dive deeper.
yeah, definitely. So my name is Krishna Kayasta. I'm an artist and I focus on the depths of the human experience. And with that comes a lot of journaling and reflection and personal development. Um, and like Lainey, I also have been taking a bit of a hiatus, like a step back from a few things and just kind of like feeling things out and seeing what calls to me and what's calling for me to come back right now. So I'm in transition, I think, with business stuff, but like it feels like a lot of stuff is still happening. It's weird.
I think that we're kind of always in this place. At least this is my experience now. My mind used to trick me into
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I'm in a transition, and meaning that there wouldn't be another, like there would be kind of end point to the transition.
Right, right.
And now, at least for the last couple of years, and maybe a little longer, I have been like, I'm always in transition. Like that's never not gonna be the case. And yeah, it's kind of just like the nature of a feminine being, which is kind of why
Yeah.
I love your work so much because um yeah, for those of you watching, I met Krishna in a kind of a creative community and heard her talk about a journal around feminine menstruation and feminine cycles and creative
Right,
cycles. And so it really piqued my interest because that's something that as an artist, obviously I am all about the creative cycles.
right.
And I've been someone who supports people going deeper in their bodies for over a decade, but I didn't put that much emphasis on menstruation. Like that just wasn't
Okay.
a big part of it. And
Yeah.
hindsight is always 2020. I look back on it and I'm like, oh, I can see why, because I worked with a lot, like early in my career. I
Mhm.
worked with a lot of women who were just so disconnected to their bodies that some didn't even
Right.
have menstruation, like eating
Right.
disorders and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, of course, it's like it comes along when it's the perfect time. So, I would say probably over the last year,
Mhm.
that's something that I was leaning deeper into and just like really enjoying the exploration and discovery, and I'm still kind of in that at times. But your journal, if you want to remind me of the name of it for everybody
Yeah.
watching too, was super helpful for just tracking.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So the journal is called Moon Cycle Insights, and it's a 365-day tracker. So you can basically really see what your overall energy and creative flow is like for a full year.
Hmm.
Um, and it was made with the intention for like people who are running their own businesses and like families can kind of see the different seasons. I think spring, summer, winter, fall, like calendar wise, is also very telling as to like how much you can do productivity wise and like what you have planned. Like for us, we know it's holiday season, and we also know it's the time to get sick a lot. We have kids who are in school. So it's like slowing down and just taking some of that pressure off of our plates is just helpful for
Hmm.
us to rest and recover and enjoy family and social time because this is like the season for it, you know? But hormonally, being on my period or being luteal, depending on what's been going on, is not the best time for me to be social, whether that's, you know, in the middle of the last week of November or Christmas. And so just kind of having those insights helps me better protect myself energy wise. Um, and really my family, because then I'm not like snapping at them, I'm not irritable, I'm not cranky, you know, things like that. But I love that there seems to be like a shift and more people are taking interest in their hormonal cycles and learning more about themselves. There's a lot of content out there. And my biggest thing is like there's no one size fits all. Everyone's bodies are different, everyone's trauma is different, your genetics are different. And so I love the journal because it gives you like a baseline to start off, and then with your tracking, you can see what best fits and works for you.
Yeah, I can appreciate what you're saying because I'm someone who doesn't like to take in a lot of information because I like to
Right.
learn what's good for me from my body and from experience. And I mean, this is just in the most basic form. I'm like somebody who wants to jump in and learn on the job, not
Right.
read an employee handbook, you know? And so same way, you know, same approach with cycle and recognizing your own cycles. And I find it's really fascinating that like my cycle is not necessarily going to look like someone else's cycle, even though there can be tendencies, kind of like what you're saying about luteal or ovulation or whatever, these inner seasons for every woman, like that being really different in that,
Yeah.
excuse me, like being more irritable during ovulation versus more vitality or more outward, more
Right.
social, like that can be different for every single person. So it's so cool to have kind of the record tracker, if you will.
Yeah.
For me, the reason why I really enjoy it, because I do know I have a lot of respect for you know, some women and leaders in the industry who encourage not to use like a personalized tracker and to actually just do the journaling so that it's more open and
Right.
um, not suggestive in a way. For me,
Hmm.
why I really love having like kind of a systematized journal, if you will, is because I can actually see if I've missed a day. You know, like if you have like an open journal and sometimes it's just a lot of time could pass and you wouldn't.
Right.
And so I don't remember when I got it, but I know it's been many months now and I've missed maybe 2 days, something like that.
Okay.
And so that's been really helpful for me to see like, oh, I am very consistent, right? Like when I pick something like that's going to
Yeah.
work for me. And I think that's a great reminder for people. Like it's not about the rules of don't do it this way or do it this way or
Right.
whatever. It's about really finding, you know, what works for you, which I think speaks to the creative process in general, right? So no matter
Absolutely.
what we're talking about, menstruation, tracking, art, you name it.
Right. And I think the biggest thing for me is like when it came to like self-development things and journaling and healing, I was just like, oh, journaling takes so much time. And it is taking me 10 years to be obsessed with journaling. I'll be very honest, right? Like now I journal every day. I love it. I look forward to it. It's definitely one of my modalities for just healing and processing. But before it was just like, who has time to sit down and like go through their thoughts and write things, you know, like it was just, it seemed like an extra to-do list. And I know many of us are just so busy and we're so overwhelmed and we have a lot of things going on, but having the knowledge of your hormonal cycle, I feel like is a form of empowerment. It's a form of resistance. Every time you get to know yourself better, you can advocate for yourself better. And so I really wanted to make a journal that was skimmed down and that could take like 2 to 5 minutes to fill out at the end or the beginning of each day, right? Because you're tracking just, I want to say like base level needs. Like there's like sleep and food and water. Like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you nurturing yourself? If you don't water a plant, it's
Right.
gonna die, right? If you don't feed the soil its nutrients, it's not gonna thrive. And so, like, are you taking care of your base needs? And how is that impacting your cycle, your mood, your productivity, your creative flow? Um, and it's very like, I don't know, it's very empowering. Like I used to get super depressed right before my cycles. Like I'd just be like sad and eating my feelings and binge watching crap on TV and just like everything sucks and nothing's going my way, da 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 da. And I started kind of like tracking. And the first thing I realized is like, oh, I get really sad before my period starts. So it's like, okay, well, that's hormonal. What else is going on? And I started journaling and I realized like, oh, I'm mad at myself for not following through on things for myself. Like I wasn't holding my own boundaries or honoring my own desires, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, what am I yelling at myself about before my
Mm-hmm.
period starts, right? And I
Right.
was like, oh, okay, like these things are really important to me. Let me try to do them. And then I started like keeping receipts. I was like, okay, I'm doing like I did the things, right? Like it could be like I didn't take care of laundry today. Like just like small executive functioning things that kind of pile up when you're just depressed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, cooking a homemade meal for the family or like taking care of that pile of papers on the counter that like every time you walk by it just drains mental energy.
Sure.
And I started knocking those out and like I'm like okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. And then in my luteal phase when I call her my inner bitch when she'd come back and be like, "Oh, you're not good enough. You're not doing the things." I was like, "No, wait, I did them. Look,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
did do them." And then through journaling, I was like, "Okay, well, what's really going on? Like, what's happening?" And I've uncovered a lot about myself, and I feel like every cycle that I track, I'm just like one step closer to me. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Of
Yeah.
just
That's
like
cool.
shedding all of the crap that I've been told
Yeah.
to be and to do over the
Right.
last 37 years, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's such a beautiful journey. And I think I've seen on your social media and stuff where you are currently, I don't remember if you're revisiting or if you recently started the morning pages with the artist way. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cool because yeah, that was like a very big piece of my story and like
Mhm.
launching into art therapy and
Yeah.
moving cross country and like doing all these things that were very big because of the
Right.
morning pages. So I was
Oh,
like,
I love that.
yeah, they were life changing for me. And I have my own twist on them now, but I love
Okay.
that you're like committed is what that's the energy that comes up that you're like in devotion to this relationship to journaling that
Right.
you've kind of created.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm on week 10. And it's been amazing. And yeah, some weeks I definitely like would give myself an A, and some weeks I just show up to the pages and I do it and I honor that, like I have a busy life, I have kids, I have things going on. So it's been great. The last time I did the artist way was about 10 years ago. So it's
mhm.
been a long time since I've like come back to it. And I've announced that I am hosting a group in 2025. So if anyone else wants to do the
Nice.
artist way, yeah. It is
Yeah.
a free group because I did not write the book and I think it's wild to like charge for that. But
Right,
if
right.
anyone wants to journal and like, find their artist child or however you want to use it. It's been great though to come back to it married with kids who just turned 7. It's wildly different experience than it
Oh, I'm
was when
sure.
I was in my early, late mid to late 20s and just newly engaged, trying to figure out where to go, what to do.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm like aware of kind of like some conditioning slash sabotage patterns that can show up for people, and myself
Mhm.
included, if you've done something once and then
Mhm.
you come back around to it. There's this very like strong protective pattern that can happen of like comparing the first go round
Yeah.
or like kind of minimizing the experience. And I think that's just, I know for myself, part of the culture that we live in that like reinforces novelty, it's like we're
Mhm.
like looking for that dopamine hit. So
Right.
go through something again. And I'm doing that now. Like I'm actually reading books that I read a long time ago. I'm reading them for a second time because I've never never given myself that experience. It was always like on to the next thing, next thing, next thing.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely.
So it's actually, I think it's a really beautiful thing that you're giving yourself like, oh, as this version of myself,
Yeah.
what is this like? And what, what comes up this go round. So
Hmm.
that's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I feel like people sign up for business courses or webinars or even like certain podcasts. And I found myself doing the same thing. I was just like going through it and it was like a to-do list. Like, okay, I listened to this, I read this, and I would have like a key takeaway here or there. But I've also slowed down like my consumption because there is a media fast in the artist way, which is
Mhm.
super hard, but very
Phenomenal
worthwhile.
though.
Yeah. And I was like, I want to have more discernment with what I'm consuming.
Hmm.
I do want to slow down and like take this in. And there's a Tim Ferriss and Elizabeth Gilbert podcast that came out recently. I've
Oh,
listened to it 3 times.
oh,
And
wow.
each time I take away something different. It's so good, you
Yeah,
know?
that's
And these
beautiful.
are two people I really like admire and respect for different things that they've done. So it just makes sense versus like, okay, I listen to this. Okay, what's the next one? What's the next one? What's the next one?
Mm.
And in doing that, I find myself slowing down. Like my nervous system is more calm. I'm more like I'm not rushing through
Yep.
my days or rushing through my to-do list.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and so it's just interesting, like through tracking of like, oh, my media consumption's causing anxiety because it makes me feel like I need to do,
Right.
whereas I don't.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've asked clients to do that, like just one whole week.
Right,
Like even just a week of doing that can be life changing.
right.
And yeah, I can feel myself gearing up to do something similar, and
Yeah.
it's like this season as we come into holidays and all of that, it could be tempting to fill up the empty
Hmm.
space. And that's something that I really have to kind of like be very diligent about, is because I'm constantly clearing my calendar and creating white space because it's like, oh, it's just like heaven to an artist to have
Yes.
wide open space. And
Absolutely.
then I have to be so careful not to fill it in with head stuff,
Yes.
like actually use it for my artist dates or actually use it to paint or actually use it to write
Yeah.
versus consume. And
Hmm.
I think, there's a balance because it's helpful to have inspirational things,
Right.
like have something that's going to get the juices flowing, but not to the point that you can't actually integrate it and then you definitely can't assimilate it in order to create something new from it. So
Right.
I think it's such a juicy conversation. So curious, since we are sharing with everyone, if there's anything that you would recommend for folks watching who want to kind of ease into that media fast, since you did it recently. I'm
Yeah.
thinking like
Um,
what was helpful for you?
so I would say first understand where you're spending your time. I think that's like a good way to start. But like where are you consuming? And that could be music, podcasts, TV, whatever it may be. And then try to drop one fully and replace it with nothing.
Hmm.
And then try to restrict or reduce a couple of others. I'm more of like the start slow and see how it feels.
Hmm.
Because maybe, I like to consider people's like traumas, even if they're not aware of them. Maybe too much silence is not helpful,
Yeah.
right? Like it needs to feel good and be productive in the sense of like it feels restful, not
Mhm.
productive in the sense of like, oh, now you're doing something and something is accomplished and not a capitalistic productivity, right?
Yeah, productivity in the sense that it's supportive of growth and regeneration versus like
Absolutely.
depleting and stressful.
Thank you. Yes, much better way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and really like see how it feels and then test out other forms of me. Like maybe you can swap, right? Like I cut back on podcasts. I barely listen to podcasts now.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of my podcasts are from friends and I love to support them and be a viewer, but it's also just like I'm talking to you in the DMs all the time. Like I already know what you're doing. I love you dearly and I want you to get the hits, but
Uh-huh.
like I need some silence, right? Or like when I drive the kids to school, they love the music in the morning. It keeps the ride very calm. So I'll have the music on the way there, but on the way back, I'll turn it off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And it's just interesting what comes up for me when I have space to think and like hear my thoughts. And the other thing I realize is like I don't have to act on all my thoughts. I
sure.
will have ideas in the car and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Like I should da, right? And then by the time I get home, I may forget. And I'm
Mm-hmm,
like, oh. And in the beginning, I was kind of getting upset about that. And I was like, well, maybe that wasn't the purpose of that thought. It was just to like have it, acknowledge it, and release it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then as I'm doing other things, if it comes back to me, it's a different, okay, like maybe this was meant for me. But it really like it really helped me realize just like I don't have to always do. I can just be and witness, and
Mm-hmm,
that's more than enough,
mm-hmm,
especially as an artist, because I want to do all the things and it can become draining, and then I don't work on like the passion projects.
mm-hmm.
And I will get to a point where it's like, well, I might as well just go get a corporate job because none of this is fun anymore.
Right. Yeah. If you
Mhm.
don't have space to nourish the artist, I had
Right.
this conversation with a client recently where it was like, because I talk a lot about the starving artist archetype compared to the wealthy
Mhm.
creative archetype. And
Yeah.
then it's like, and there are times where it's not even about the starving artist, like where you're just, kind of making ends meet from your art and can't really live the,
Right.
but it's actually about starving the artist because you're not getting the nourishment needed to create quality work, and
Right.
nourishment coming from empty white space, time to just meander and wonder,
Mhm.
explore, even create shitty art,
Yeah.
like if you're so ingrained and hooked into that Western culture of productivity where
Yeah.
everything has to be efficient and monetized and going somewhere,
Hmm.
then you're actually starving the artist. So not only do we have the starving artist archetype, but now we have the starving of the artist. And it's like, yeah, that's just not helpful. And
Right.
I can really appreciate what you're saying about, kind of the baby step into your media fast, or even just like media deprivation in a sense. It's like for someone who's so used to consuming all the time, that
Right.
silence can be very jarring.
Yeah.
And
It can be.
I've had to learn that a little bit, the hard way sometimes with clients that have like a lot of trauma. It's not so much present in my current work, but just in years
Mhm.
past where it was like that. There's a reason why they're not doing the quote unquote homework. Like if that's
Right.
much for their nervous system to write or to take a week
Mhm.
off of media or whatever, then we have to really look at that resistance of like, what is the fear here? Like,
Right.
what are we so afraid of? And then like baby step into that.
You're right. Or what is it feeding? Right? Like you're doing something because it's giving you something. And what is that something? And where else can we get it?
Mm-hmm.
You
Absolutely.
know? And yeah, I've found that there's a bunch of different ways to heal. And before I used to just be like, oh, I can't do this, or it'd be hard, it'd be challenging to like integrate whatever modality or technique someone was sharing, and I'd be like, oh, what's wrong with me? And I've changed that to like, oh, this isn't meant for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there are so many different ways
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to come back to yourself, right? Like before it was just like, oh, like everyone has a way. And it's like, yeah, because everyone's so different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's
Yeah. And
important.
even, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. I just think it's important to like know, like be able to tap in, know what feels good, and do something that's nurturing and supportive versus another to-do list that puts your body in fight or flight.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my God, do I have horror stories of that where it was like, because I was such a perfectionist
Right.
about my self-care that
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point of it was just like so comical of, and sometimes we just have to get to that point where we see the insanity in order to
Right.
stop the insanity, because I would like
Yes.
rushing to a yoga class or rushing to a meditation or rushing to a massage
Yes.
or whatever to try and like get all the self-care in. And it's like, maybe we don't need so much self-care if self-care is stressing me out.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think it's, yeah, it's like having that discernment,
Mhm.
people. And oh, there was something you were saying that I wanted to respond. Oh, yeah, there's actually, I love what you're saying about, like finding what works for you, because I think that's true no matter what we're talking about. But even if we take it outside the healing paradigm and we're
Mhm.
just looking at it like, okay, there's not actually anything to heal in the here and now. The like healing part of it is that I am not abandoning myself or pushing myself too hard or ignoring my boundaries or kind of
Right.
punitive in some way. And so the health that's present is like, what do I actually want that would be fueling and feeding to me?
Yeah.
And that actually allows us to be in that, yeah, just like a thriving place, like not even necessarily something to heal, but just always coming back to what do I want and need now?
Right.
Because I think so often people are stuck in their head just because of the conditioning that we've all been through,
Mhm.
that we're just kind of ignoring what the present moment wants and needs now,
Absolutely.
and kind of getting stuck in like almost like there's somewhere to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's like the old, like what you've subscribed to. And I say that from the experience of like in the past year, if you had been in like Zoom rooms with me, you would have heard me say like, "Oh, I want to be in galleries and I want to do this and I want to do that." But those weren't mine. Those were
Mm-hmm.
ideas that like I had subscribed to, and I had so much resistance to it that I hadn't painted in like 8 months. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in these rooms talking about how I want to be in galleries, but I hadn't painted anything. I hadn't even touched it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And through I mean honestly I realized it recently, so I want to say through Artist Way and through the media fast I
Yeah.
was able to like create space to be like, oh, those aren't fully like my goals. I took
Yeah.
my corporate goals and I put an art facade over them, and I was like, oh, the corporate equivalent to a corner office or being head of a department is a solo gallery show. And
Totally pedestal. I get it.
yeah, and I was like, and I was like, I really want to write a children's book. Where does a gallery artist, like, how does that fall into that, you know? And I packed up a lot of my art supplies. That's why my background is blurred out because my office is a mess. And I found a bunch of old work and I was like, oh, this is pretty good. Like, I like this. And it was my ego self, this corporate self that hadn't been processed, dealt with, whatever, that was calling the shots. I was like, no, that's not good enough. Don't show anybody that. And I was like,
Hmm.
no, but wait, I like it. And so, and also I was doing art markets, but I was like, oh, art markets aren't going to get me into galleries. So I stopped doing art markets. But
Did you enjoy the art markets? Or
I
you?
did, they're fun. It's fun to hang out with other artists. It's fun to talk to people, It's fun to just, it's kind of like being in community and
Uh-huh.
maybe making some money while you're there. Um, and so I did two last month and I had a great time. Yeah, I sold some artwork and I brought all the stuff that I found and all the ego, like everything was there on the table and I was like, take what you want, and it was great, but it's just like, okay, like really
That's so
like,
cool.
yeah, like stepping into self
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
without the fear, right? Like unsubscribing to just all the bullshit of what we're told to be and to do and what we're supposed to want.
The thing that I love the most about what you're sharing
Hmm.
is, because to me that's like artist living, like
Yeah.
full-time artist living is like doing the thing for the experience of it, because artists
Yeah.
are just so process oriented. And by
Right.
process oriented, I don't mean processing like sitting in therapy on a couch, verbally processing.
Right.
I mean like we sensorially process our
Mhm.
experiences by being in the world, living in the world, touching, painting,
Yeah.
all of the things. And so it's like being in the art market is the perfect example of I have no idea if I'm going to sell anything at this or if it's going to go
Right.
where, if I'm going to meet anybody. I'm just doing it for the experience.
Hmm.
And that is like such a cool thing for alchemizing that starving artist archetype, because
Right.
it's giving yourself a wealth of experience and then
Yeah.
trusting like this is feeding me so I don't have to worry about where it's going. And Julia Cameron does talk about that, like the apples and oranges. I don't know if you remember that part of the book.
Hmm.
Energetically, it's like you might be putting out apples. You don't need to be searching hyper vigilantly. I'm putting this in my words now, but you don't need to be
Yeah.
searching hyper vigilantly. That's a tongue twister. Vigilantly to where are the apples? Where are the apples going to come from? I need to get apples back. It's like you
Right.
might get oranges. You might just open the door one day and have a basket of oranges. It doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be this like tit for tat.
Transaction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It
Exactly.
doesn't have to be a very clear transaction. And it's actually kind of funny, or at least I find it funny, because I will take one 6-foot table and I have my art on one side and I have all my journals on the other side. And
Mhm.
mainly I just take the line journals and the moon cycle insights journals. And I will talk to someone about their hormonal cycle before I'll talk to them about my art.
Oh, okay.
Because one, I think it's such an interesting conversation starter. I'm like, hey, do you track your period? Because no
Yeah.
one's expecting someone to ask you that, especially a
Yeah.
stranger,
All
right?
right.
And two, I so badly just want to educate people and empower people. If you
Mm,
buy my art, cool, but if I can just get you to think about your hormones just a little bit more and have a
mm.
little bit more self-love, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that's a win.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that energy is magnetic too, when
Yeah.
you're like doing the thing that you love that you can't
Right.
not do, then yeah, like energetically you're going to be attracting all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love this. I love this conversation. There was let's see, what did I put when I was sharing that we're going to do this talk? I was like creative cycles, body-led business, um there might have been something else in there, but I know the grief piece is kind of something that we already touched on. So I feel
Mhm.
like we're like checking it off, though there's no check box over here. Um,
Right.
is there anything else that you want to get into or share kind of like what's unfolding for you? Or I know you mentioned that the creative, not creative, but the Artist Way is a group that you're excited to do in the new year.
Yeah.
Is there
So
anything?
I'm offering journals still. So you can find those on my website. I also just released dot grid journals for those a little bit more creative and want to create their own layouts and do their own tracking. And
Mm.
someone I have friends who are just like, I don't like lines. Can you just give me dots? And I'm like, okay, I'll give you just dots, like just for you. I got you. Um, so I did just put those up on the website. My 2025 plans are very chill at the moment, I'll be very honest. I'm trying not to overcommit.
Yeah,
Just like you were mentioning earlier, I've created a lot of space and I'm trying to be very intentional with how I fill it.
yeah,
Um, so I have joined a creative writing corner that meets like on Discord because I do want like I want to write a children's book and I want to write a book on like short essays and just my thoughts on things because people have told me that it's interesting and I want to honor that feedback. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Try not to judge myself and just do, but I'm like, okay, I want to work on my writing, so I'm doing that. And I'm hosting the Artist Way group once in 2025. And I am playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like that is on my 2025 list.
It dawned on me as you were saying that. I'm thinking about doing like a little bonus, I don't know, sometime this year talk,
Mhm.
or not a talk, but like just a round circle, like just
Right.
a creatives artist round circle on the book writing and publishing process
Oh,
because
no.
I've written and published 2 books. My partner's written and published 6 books. He's a
Oh, amazing.
children's writer. And
I
I'm
had
like,
no idea. You
yeah,
guys, this
yeah.
is
I'm
the
like,
universe. This is the artist
we're
way
we're
at
kind
work.
of we're kind of I don't know how to say this, but I would say we're pretty low key about the book stuff.
Right.
Like he actually is way more involved. I'm just like, I like to write. I don't care about anything else. Like I just want
Right.
the business side of it, I'm not too deep into because I just used it more as a like a gift, to my
Mhm.
clients. There's a lot of prompts and tools and things inside it. But
Right.
we've been talking a lot about 2025 and we both want to be writing way more in 2025.
Okay.
And so it's kind of serendipitous that you're talking about the children's book thing because that's not something that really ever comes up in my spaces, but because I'm thinking about bringing my partner into this call, of course it's
Right.
showing up. So I'll have to keep you posted on that because that will be a fun thing to
Yeah.
have there if that calls to you. But yeah, I just feel like there's so much, kind of potential in the field right now of like here we are, it's the end of the year, we're in the last quarter and
Right.
things are falling away from what's been in 2024 and little seeds are starting to be planted for 2025. And I think just, in the topic of creative cycles, it's just so beautiful to have conversations like this that just feed that, feed the
Yeah.
reminder that there's always going to be something passing away. There's always
Hmm.
going to be something sprouting up. And I think we're always going to be in transition. It's just like the
Absolutely.
artist way, pun intended.
Yeah. And I think with like, it is November 7th, we'll call the elephant in the room what it is. We've just had a major election. And so
Yeah.
I do want to just focus on community and building what we need. And I find that I'm being called to do it more locally,
Mm,
more in where I live
mm.
versus online. There are so many wonderful online spaces that I would rather just join something that's already been
Participate. Yeah.
built
Hmm.
and like collaborate in that manner. And
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the other reasons for the spaciousness of like, okay, where am I going to be called to show up? Like, what are we doing? What's happening? Um, how can I support my neighbors? How can I support the people in my town? Things
Mm.
like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I can really appreciate that because I've gone through quite a journey after relocating and I'm in Oregon.
okay.
I was in Arizona for 12 years and it's like
Okay.
just it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it did take me some time to
Yeah,
really kind of
absolutely.
get some roots and I feel that now after almost 2 years. February will make 2 years in my current. And there's like it's a real dance to
Yeah.
nurture the in-person
Yep.
and nurture the online because
Yeah.
I had a expressive arts therapy practice where it was just in person. So everything was about nurturing local community and all of that. And then when I
Right.
moved to online, it was just about the online. So now I'm in this like hybrid season and it's
Right.
very interesting. I'm very much like I have the popcorn and I'm like, I wonder how all of this is gonna unfold. Just watching
I
watching the
love
movie
that.
that is my life.
That's such a wonderful approach. Yeah, we went from New York to California and now we're in Georgia.
Okay.
So huge shift
Mhm.
just all around. And then we're pretty far from like the city of Atlanta.
Mm.
So, um, it takes time, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I will make sure to add your links in the description, and that way people know where to find you. And thank you so much for being here and just sharing your wisdom and experience. And of course, I trust if anybody's interested in checking out Krishna's journals and art and books and all the things that they can find you in the links I'll provide. And yeah, just wishing you a lovely, lovely end of 2024.
thank you. I'm so glad we did this. I know we had to schedule a few times, so I'm glad we were
Yeah,
able
no, it was
to
worth
get
the
this.
wait. It was worth the wait.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really good. Good to